We start is just to say we're not expecting a fire drill, but in the event the fire alarm does go off, it will be for real. So please make your way downstairs and out of the building, and we will meet at the far end of the car park. The fire officer is Mrs. Young, who's here, so follow her. Okay. This is a public meeting, and I realise that we're restricted from the number of members of the public who can attend due to COVID restrictions, and the meeting is being live streamed. But members of the public, of course, are welcome to listen to the debate today, but unless you're actually registered as a speaker, then you're not able to take part or speak, I'm afraid. So just to give everybody an indication of how the planning applications will be presented, we've got two this morning, and both will be presented in the same way. So to save me repeating it all second time round, so we'll start off with the case officer presenting her report, and then there will be the registered speakers who will be called forward in an order. And each registered speaker, you will have 3 minutes in which to speak. And what we would ask is, there's a podium there. And I believe Mrs. Young has already spoken to you about the process, but if you use a hand sanitizer and take a microphone and bring it up, turn the microphone on, and then we'll start your time once you're there and you're settled and ready to go. When you've finished, there might be questions from members, but when you finish that bit, if you could replace your microphone ready for the next person to come up and take a fresh microphone. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Mr. Young will be keeping an eye on the time, so when you're getting near to the end of your 3 minutes, she will give you a brief 30-second warning, and she will then just say time at the end if you haven't already finished. And at that point, I would ask you just to wind up with your last sentence if you haven't already finished, else I will have to stop you. Okay? That's just in the interests of fairness for everybody. Once that is all done, then we will then move into the next stage, which is where members will be able to debate and come to a conclusion. Okay, so I would like to start off by inviting the officers at the top table to introduce themselves. Mr. Devon, over to you first.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Fairbairn, Head of Legal Services and Monitoring Officer for the Council.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the public. I'm Councillor Terry Pearce. I'm Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee and also Ward Member for Mary Tavy. Thank you.
Apologies. My name's Anna Henderson-Smith. I'm the case officer for the two applications before you this morning, and I'm standing in for the head of practice.
Good morning, members and everyone. It's nice to be back. I'm Phil Townsend from Devon County Council Highways.
Janice Young, Democratic Services Officer.
Caroline Mott, Bristow Ward, Lead Member for Planning.
Good morning, it's Barry Ratcliffe. I'm the West Ham Borough Councillor for the Exbourne Ward. Thank you.
Diana Moyes, Borough and Horrobridge Ward.
Tony Leach, Oakhampton North.
Terry Southcott, Bristow Ward.
Steve Hipsey, Tavistock North.
Paul Vachon, Oakhampton South.
Thank you all very much. And yes, we will just remind people that everybody will need to turn microphones on before they speak. Otherwise, the live feed won't pick up the vocals. All the public will see is a lot of, and won't be able to hear anything. Okay. So over to the agenda then. We will start off, which is with item 1, which is apologies for absence, Ms. Young.
Thank you, just from Councillor Enders.
Thank you. And item 2, declarations of interest. And members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at the meeting. Anybody wish to declare? Councillor Leach.
Yes, application 01 13621 ARM. I need to declare an interest mainly because of my long-term involvement with this proposed development. And I will leave the room when this comes up.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. I would declare a personal interest in both applications because of my role as a member of the Management Committee of the Devon Building Control Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will also, Councillor Radcliffe.
Thank you, Chairman. And similar comment as before, I am also a member of the Devon Building Control Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will also just declare an interest, and in the interest of transparency as well, that I'm the ward member for application 0136/21/ARM. And I have met the registered speaker and also been contacted by an objector and a supporter on this application, and I confirm that my conversations with the latter two have been purely around the process, and I've had no conversation at all with the registered speaker on this. Okay. Any other further declarations? Okay. Item 3, items requiring urgent attention. There are none. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. So, are members happy that I sign the minutes of the meeting, which were held on the 15th of June, as a true and accurate record? Anybody got any questions or queries or any errors or omissions on page 1, 2, page 3, or 4? Okay, everybody's happy. I will sign those in due course. Thank you. Okay. Item 5, so now we come to the planning applications, and the first one, so Councillor Leach, if you'd like to leave the room, and I will ensure that somebody comes out to bring you back in when we move to the next one, okay? Are you going to be in the members' room? Out there. Okay, lovely, thank you, so we can find you. Lovely, thank you. So 013621 reserve matters, which is for land in Exeter Road, Oakhampton, and over to Ms Henderson-Smith, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And again, good morning, members. The first application before you is a reserve matters application for 50 houses. The outline permission was approved in 2018 with the access arrangements approved at the time. So this aspect is not up for reconsideration today, and nor is the principle of 50 units in this location within this site. That has been determined by the outline permission. So rather, what's before you today is the remaining matters or reserve matters of landscaping, appearance, layout and scale. This site will probably be familiar to many of you, but it is on the east of Oakhampton between Moorcroft Close, just here, the railway line here and Fatherford Road here, with Exeter Road running to its north. Again, here's the application site. It's currently an agricultural field at present, with boundary planting of mature trees and hedgerows, which is quite evident from this aerial photograph. For the benefit of the public and those members who are unable to attend last week's site visit, where I think the majority of members were on site, I'll just go through some photographs to give some context for the site. So, from the current verge onto Exeter Road, looking into town to the west. This is from the access points looking west into town, and that cream rendered property you can see is the first property on the adjacent development. And then looking east up towards Molehaven, the railway line, the more recent Blue Bridge there, and the current change in speed limit to a 40 from a 30. This is the site, and beyond it from the industrial estate entrance opposite, so that's the estate entrance into Hamilton Road Industrial Estate. So looking back towards where the existing entrance point is, which you can just see here. And obviously you can see the adjacent development here, and the outline of Dartmoor National Park beyond. If you're coming into Oakhampton from the east, coming off the A30, this is the first sort of view of the first view of the site you would get. That's Fatherford Lane on the left-hand side of the picture, where you can see the national speed limit signs coming up to join Exeter Road going through town. So those poles there and that height and level of hedging is the corner of the site. And you can see that there's a small section of pavement, so I'm a bit in trouble with the cursor, small section of pavement along here. There's actually a tactile paving drop here, and similarly opposite on this section of road for crossing over from Fatherford Lane. This is the view southeast at Dartmoor National Park from within the site, looking across over the top of an adjacent property, which is Fatherford Lodge in behind these conifers here, and Fatherford Lane runs the other side of this hedge. And similarly, the southwest, again out towards Dartmoor National Park, just looking across the site there. The corner with the heightened area of hedge I just showed you, if you were to jump over that hedge, that's exactly where you'd be standing, and that's the whole site. You can just about see the return on the left-hand side there of the hedge coming back up towards you. So that's the whole site taken from that northeastern corner, looking southwest with Dartmoor beyond and the properties on Moorcroft Close there just in front of you. And that's those closer up. So that gives members an idea of the relationship and the orientation of the properties. It's predominantly the side and rear of the properties on Moorcroft Close that are adjacent to the western boundary of our application site. This is looking east along the southern boundary. So the southern boundary is the best treed boundary. That's looking towards, again, Fatherford Lodge, which kicks in on this corner, sort of takes a nibble, if you like, out the corner of the application site. Again, you can see these conifers to the rear and Fatherford Lodge is in there, with Fatherford Lane beyond. And this is just to identify the fact that there are quite differing boundaries along the western boundary at the moment. There are quite different boundary treatments. So I think that has depended to an extent on the preference of those living on Moorcroft Close. There are some banks, there's some fencing, there's some walling with hedging. There's a variety along there. So the layout and design which is before you today for consideration is a revised design. You should have seen, hopefully, from the report that the first design wasn't considered acceptable on several aspects. So a discussion was had with the applicant and a revised scheme was negotiated upon with officers and consultees looking at the scheme. So the scheme before you today is the result of those discussions and the result of the applicant's response to, if you like, the first round of consultation on the initial scheme. For those who were not part of the planning committee, because it was a committee decision, I believe, in 2018, the previous permission, the outline permission, stipulated at condition 25 that no housing construction should take place below the line, which is quite evident here. It was shown on plan in the previous approval, and it's essentially the build line, if you like, as exists already along the existing development, and that carried through. And condition 25 of the outline said there was to be no housing to the south of that line. This layout achieves that and only places supporting infrastructure of public open space and timber style, sort of that rustic timber style play equipment and the Suds Pond into this area to the south. There is no housing beyond the line that was previously stipulated. I'll stick with this one for a minute. The scheme is for 50 units, 40% affordable housing. That was, again, secured at the outline permission. The mix of both the affordable housing mix and tenure and the market mix, which is proposed, are both broadly in line with and echo the local identified need for both market and affordable housing. Again, that's elaborated on within your report. Some quite significant changes were made to the scheme to bring it to a point of being policy compliant. This alteration in the mixes, plus the inclusion of electric vehicle charging points for all of those with on-plot parking, compliance with Dev 32, which I'm sure you're all familiar with now, which talks about low carbon and renewables. There are solar panels to meet that 10% requirement being incorporated onto the site. The unit sizes themselves, the garden sizes accompanying them, and the number of parking spaces were all altered to now be SPD compliant. So some of that reflects the national space standards, but also our own requirements regarding garden sizes and parking requirements. This shows members, this is the affordable housing distribution plans that gives you an idea of the two different tenures and how they're distributed across the site. The landscaping scheme and the play equipment have been altered and enhanced to address consultee and officer comments, as have the roadways, with softening of the engineering, reduction in paving and sort of hard engineering features, and a greening of the public realm. This is the play space. You can see that triangle, sort of pie shape here. That's just elaborated on there. So it's important to note on the frontage that there is a footway to be provided from the existing footway, which currently finishes just to the east of Moorcroft Close on the edge of Exeter Road. But it is to be provided within the site itself. It comes into the site, along, and then back out near that tactile paving point that I pointed out on a previous image. So there will be continuous pedestrian access availability essentially along the front of the development, but not on the frontages as we would normally see it, you know, up tight against the carriageway or the highway. It's provided within the site. But this does still allow the properties along Exeter Road to have a frontage to face the road, allowing for a sort of more attractive built form and a stronger entry to the town. So this plan just shows, this is the entrance to the industrial estate at the moment, and this is the one to Moorcroft Close. And you'll see the pavement currently finishes roughly here. So that will be extended down in the existing access point, along inside the site, crossing over the access road, again inside the site, because there's a fairly substantial hedge along here, and then out to where the existing tactile paving point is. So it would either pick up the pavement down for those wanting to walk down Fatherford Lane, or crossing over to either come back along Exeter Road, or to go over the Blue Bridge. It's probably got a formal name, sorry, I always call it the Blue Bridge, over towards Molehaven and the garden centre in that direction. So just going back to what I've just said about fronting, one of the problems with the previously submitted scheme was that a lot of the properties along the frontage actually turned their back to the highway. The revised scheme on officer advice and comment very much turns its front to Exeter Road to provide quite a strong entry into town. This is the first housing development you'll see if you come off the A30 and enter into town in this way. So this, again, this is the tactile paving point on sort of the left-hand side of the screen here. So this is what you would see. This is a photo montage if you were travelling into town from the A30 coming from the east to the west. And again, a montage if you were crossing that bridge, and that's the bridge over the railway. That's that corner you would see going down onto Fatherford Lane, and I think it's a terrace of 3 on that corner, are totally clad in local stone. So again, that's the, if you like, bookend to the development that would be present on that site. The use of materials in this area is extremely important. What we've got proposed at the moment is the use of natural local stone, particularly to the corner plots and some key buildings. That is vernacular to this area and appropriate to an edge of town hamlets location. And as you can see from this last image, complements the fact that the bridge is also done in local randomly laid stone. That material as a finished product is combined at the moment with a recommendation, so it's 3 different render colours. They have been taken from the East of Oakhampton Master Plan design section, which is now, that section of the Master Plan was incorporated into the supplementary planning document when that was adopted last year. So those colours have been taken from the recommended palette within that. This will help, in my view, to soften any longer views you've got of the site. You won't get that ubiquitous sort of just white and off-white combination. There's a buff, there's a pale sort of flesh pink colour, and there's a cream. And then, as I say, you've got quite a number of stone-clad units. There are no what we call wraps provided on this site. It's a pet hate of mine, and I made that very clear. The ones that are stone on all 4 sides. Those that are render on all 4 sides, not, you know, brick on the back and just a sort of wrap on the front to a couple of feet back. They are wholly the material that they're proposed in. So these are just a selection of the street scenes, just to give an idea, really, of the kind of mix of units and the mix of materials that are being used. I think the third, I'm sorry, because I know the text doesn't come out very well on these, the third street scene down is the Exeter Road frontage, showing the entry to the site there with the sort of pair of stone properties either side of the access point. Just in relation to materials, it's not on the report before you, but I'd like to add another recommended condition. Many members may have seen that before, particularly from me, which is the inclusion of an additive. It sounds a bit evil. It's a biocidal additive that goes into the render, but what it prevents is that, or seeks to prevent, and it seems to have been quite effective, is that leaching that you will have seen in Tavistock and Oakhampton, which can really happen quite quickly before really even the development's sort of off-site, and it does seem to have been quite successful. It's been incorporated in a couple of more recent developments. So apologies, my omission. So I'm just, when I come to my recommendation at the end, I'll make it clear that it's with that additional condition for the inclusion of that additive into the render, in the rendered properties. This is not every single house type design because there are rather a lot, but it gives you a flavour of the different materials and the different house types that are on the table for consideration. So there are 2, 3, 4 beds predominantly. They're all relatively simple in design terms, and I don't use that as a derogatory term. They are vernacular to the area. There are not arts and crafts elements and, you know, add-ons here, there, and everywhere, because that just isn't characteristic of this particular area, particularly as you get out into the hamlets. So just in summary then, there are currently no specialist objections outstanding on this application. All the issues that were raised with regards to the initial scheme submitted by specialists and officers have now been overcome. However, objections do remain from neighbours and both Oakhampton Town Council and the Hamlets Parish Council. These are detailed within your reports for you. As always with planning applications, some of those issues have various weights and solutions. That's all been, sorry. They've all been set out in detail in my report, so I'm not going to reiterate that all now for you. As I say, it's far better detailed in the report. However, in my opinion, where objections or issues raised by members of the public or the town or parish council or officers on the previous scheme are able to have been addressed, in my view, they have been. And there was certainly a rationale provided to officers where certain things couldn't be incorporated or couldn't be addressed in a certain way. That's been rationalised to us for our understanding. So there have been a lot of changes made. For example, the units that are now adjacent to Moorcroft are much fewer in number. If I can just take you back briefly, I'll leave us on the the actual units that share a boundary with Moorcroft Close are now far fewer in number. There's one here, this is garaging, there's one here, this is a garage, and there's one here. So although you've got a terrace, it's going this way. Last time it went the other way, so you have a lot more family units essentially and a lot more gardens going onto the same single property, for example, whereas now there are only 3 units. The distances are more acceptable and the relationship and the orientation is more acceptable. So that was one of the changes that were made. And similar changes were made down in this corner with regards to the relationship with Fatherford Lodge. This is the pumping station, it's wholly underground. But again, you've got an end of unit and the separation distance here. I've detailed all of those within your report, but is far more acceptable given that this is higher than Fatherford Lodge. So all of those relationships have been better addressed. And again, that's set out in the report. So it's officer view that with the conditions and the securement of boundaries and obscure glazing and the other conditions before you, the scheme that is before you is well considered, has massively improved on the first submission and has addressed and responded to all the advice and concerns raised wherever possible. It's therefore now considered to be policy compliant scheme, which, subject to conditions as set out in the report and with the additional condition regarding the additive, is recommended for approval as per your agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I open to questions from members, I'm just going to invite Mr. Townsend if there's anything you can add, particularly regarding the estate inside and the roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Ms. Anderson-Smith has already mentioned, and as has been outlined fully in the report, this application is for the approval of reserved matters following the grant of outline planning permission. The details of the access to the Exeter Road were approved at the outline stage, so they're not really for consideration at this point. The internal layout, however, is under consideration, but it's worth mentioning that as part of the outline consent for the access, the developer has to pay, by means of the Section 106 agreement requirements, a £5,000 contribution towards the investigation and review of the speed limit on Exeter Road in the vicinity of the site. But the Highway Authority would actually intend to use that contribution not only to look at the immediate vicinity of the site, but also to look a bit further afield as far as the White House service area to the other side of the A30, which is actually in Dartmoor National Parks area. But the speeds along that road are considered to be an issue that require review, and that contribution will be used not only to review the immediate vicinity, but also further afield. Now, the principle of roads being designed as shared surfaces or mixed movement areas, roads without footways, has been a preferred design option when vehicle speeds can be suitably restrained within the development by means of length of straights, bends, other features to restrain vehicle speeds. That's been an accepted design principle for 40 years now, since the introduction of Design Bulletin 32. The whole layout in this instance effectively complies with that requirement, and therefore the whole layout has been designed as a shared surface, i.e. a road without footways. The Highway Authority currently favours the use of grass verges on service margins as throughout developments from an ongoing maintenance perspective. And it's also useful to bear in mind here that they perform a function of very useful reserves to put recycling bins on bin day in an area where they're on the highway, but they're not obstructing footways or carriageways. So the design solution that has been put forward by the developer is acceptable to the Highway Authority as a suitable solution. It's also been considered acceptable in this instance, not only because the carriageways are short and restrict vehicle speeds, but it's a sensitive location. It's on the outskirts of Oakhampton and it's visible from Dartmoor National Park. And the number of spaces provided off-street in this low-density development, together with the width of the proposed carriageways, will it give an acceptable highway solution without encroachment onto the verges by parked cars? The provision of footways throughout, which would not necessarily be unacceptable to the Highway Authority, was considered to be an unnecessary urbanisation, having regard to the sensitive location of the site, and the proposals are therefore acceptable to the Highway Authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I just have one question, I think is for you probably. With regard to maintaining the verges, would they be expected to be maintained by the homeowners, or would they be part of the any adoption?
At this
with Devon
stage, I
County?
can't say for certain, but I believe that we would be prepared to accept a management company to maintain the verges, or they would be maintained by the adjacent homeowners. At this moment in time, I don't know the answer to that question. It depends when because of course the developer may not offer the road for adoption. It is their choice.
I appreciate that. That's why it was tempered with if it went for adoption. Okay, members, have you got any questions? Councillor Moyes and then Councillor Mott.
Yes, am I right in thinking the 3-storey houses are down on the right-hand side there? Because you said there was quite a high, or was that wrong?
Sorry, can I just... The majority of the 3-storey units are within the site. That section at the bottom is Street Scene 1, which is along this southern road here, looking north. So you can see these units here with the rooms in the roof. If I zoom back in again, sorry.
Yeah, that's
On
fine,
here,
I think.
you can just about see them, I
Yeah.
think, shown in the southern roof slopes on those units there. The majority are only 2-storey. I think they're the only 3-storey or 2.5-storey.
Okay, thank you. Another question. On the western boundary, at the top of the plan that we've got, are they bushes or trees? And are the residents in Moor, whatever the name of the road is, quite happy with what we've proposed?
So through you, Chair, are you discussing this section along here? So that's a combination of a new Devon hedge bank planted on top of it, and then the incorporation of some specimen trees through there. Our landscape officer is happy with that. I don't believe all the residents of Moorcroft Close are. There is obviously their objections to the scheme are set out within the report, and I understand we're to hear from a speaker later on.
Thank you.
Councillor Mott, then Councillor Hipsey, please.
Thank you. I see in your report on page 12 where you talk about the roof tiles being plain, smooth, grey concrete. However, within our SPD 11.96, it insists on slate tiles, particularly as it is visible from the National Park. Can you explain to me why we've got that discrepancy, please?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, the SPD is guidance. It can't insist on anything. I appreciate it points towards a requirement for slate. A lot of changes to materials have been made on this site. The east of Oakhampton developments in general, none of them are entirely slate, and a couple of them are entirely concrete roof tiles. In distanced views, providing they are plain concrete and not ridged or textured, from long distanced views from the moor, it is difficult to tell the difference. There were some quite heavy concessions made with regards to the use of stone on site, and it's one of those situations where you know, in my view, a high proportion of the requirements have been met with regards to the SPD. It's very unusual to have every single requirement met. I'm content with the materials that have been provided. As I say, the SPD is guidance, but members can obviously take their own view on that if they wish.
Thank you. I have further questions, please. I'm concerned, obviously, again, with its visibility from the moor and surrounding. What permitted development rights does this site have, or are we able to condition against that?
This site's got its full permitted development. I don't believe any were removed at outline stage. It's unusual to do that. The only elements of PD that I've removed in the recommendation before you are in relation to the windows facing towards Moorcroft Close. The other units all retain their full PD. The guidance has for some time, and this is the national guidance, been very clear that the removal of PD should be the absolute exception, not the rule. It's fairly evident from the way the government's going that it wants to relax and increase PD, not restrict it, and that you have to have an incredibly good reason to do so. The requirements around household PD now do stipulate that were any extensions allowable under PD, that they have to be matching materials in order to render them PD. There are conditions to permitted development. Things like garden sheds, I appreciate that they can sometimes look a little cluttered in back gardens, but we have to consider whether it's reasonable to stop people putting a shed up in their own garden, and consider the number of applications that's likely to entail and how many we would reasonably say no to. So on balance, it is something I considered on this site, given its visibility. But given the limitation of the built development, the screening that the south elevation already provides, and the introduced additional planting that runs, sorry, I keep losing the cursor, is proposed to be introduced along here. I don't consider that the level of permitted development in the size of these gardens and the arrangement they are that people could exercise would diminish the views that you would have following the development from Dartmoor National Park. That's my view.
Thank you. Apologies, Chair. I have a few. Sorry, members. I'm pleased, sorry, the picture's gone. I'm pleased to see that some of the properties have solar panels on them. However, it's disappointing to note that even though there are several properties with a south-facing aspect that would allow for solar panels, that they do not have them. Perhaps that's probably a question better directed at the speaker for the applicant, is it? Or are you able to answer that one?
Are you able to answer that one, Ms. Henderson Smith? I know you've lost your screen.
Oh, I've lost something, Chair, I'm sorry. The number of, the plan we've got in front of us at the moment doesn't identify, I think the solar panels are the little red, the PV panels are the tiny red rectangles. If this comes back, sorry. I don't know why it's just not casting. I think in terms of why it's not more than 10%, that's probably a question best put to the speaker for the applicant. However, what I would say, and being completely honest and open with members as I always am, is that that Dev 32 policy wasn't in play at the time of the outline, so it wasn't secured at the time of the outline. Which is something we would now do. If this outline came in tomorrow, we would be securing the mix, the Dev 32 compliance, the compliance with the space standards and the garden sizes, all those kind of things would be secured at outline stage. They weren't, so it was a negotiative process with the applicant to encourage and invite that compliance now, given that the outline was pre-JLP. So, you know, I'm glad to see that we've got compliance with the space standards, the gardens, the parking, the vehicle charging points, and as I say, the 10% requirement. I don't think officers felt that given that situation, it was reasonable to invite over and above.
We may differ on that one. Can I check, please, bearing in mind that we have issues with the waste bins within borough and their collections. I see that there were bins in the picture for the play area. Can I ask whether they are going to be picked up by hamlets? Are they going to be taken over by West Devon, or is that going to come under the management committee to pay that bill?
Through you, Chair, I'm sorry, at this current point in time, I don't know who would be made responsible for those. That would be, if it were to be approved, there's obviously a discussion there to be had about parish council versus management. I can't speak for what West Devon picks up these days, I'm afraid. With regards to the day-to-day domestic refuse, environmental services are happy with the layout in terms of the domestic collections, but in terms of bins around the play area, I'm afraid I can't say. A bit like Phil's comment with regards to adoption, until a scheme comes forward, there will be a management company on this site, and that's secured through the outline. So if there were no option for West Devon to adopt, or the parish council to adopt, then it would have to be picked up by the management company.
Thank you. I'm just mindful of the survey that's going out at the moment with waste bins across the borough. I also see in the middle of the development with the well, there have been concerns raised about this and the capping off of it and the where the water effectively is going to go. I notice there's quite a large number of trees planted very close to that well. How can we be sure, please, that the roots of those trees are not going to affect that well and vice versa?
Thank you. Through you again, Chair. Essentially, there are various options. There's a detailed landscaping condition on the outline, which would still be required to be discharged. That could be explored further there. There are options. They could either be planted within tree pits, which is the sort of thing you'd normally use if you were planting within the verge or adjacent to the highway to ensure that the roots can't go out any further. Or if Devon County Council, as the lead local flood authority, are content that the capping off of the well would mean that if there was root ingress, it wouldn't actually be a problem, then there needn't be a tree pit or a root protection layer in there. But it will be a discussion for the sort of detailed geotechnicians, if you like, with regards to landscaping and drainage as to whether there's a problem. At the moment, both the landscape officer is aware of the presence of the well and has signed off and is happy with the landscape layout, and similarly Devon County Council, as the lead local flood authority, have seen the landscape plans and the drainage plans, including what's on there as existing. Thank you very much. I'll try not to break it again. Maybe if I just don't touch it. Then, as I say, that each have seen the other's plans and are currently content with the arrangement there and the interplay between the two. You're quite right, at the moment, or the plan shows quite a large area of, I've got no pointer now, quite a large area around those trees in the central area. For those of you who don't know where the well is, right slap bang in the middle of the built area, there's a large tree with 3 smaller trees shown to its northwest. That's where you're looking. And it's been given quite an area of grace and quite a large buffer area around it. So there's no built development sort of uptight to the well as it stands at the moment.
Thank you. Apologies, Chair. Final one. Concern was raised about the property in the bottom left-hand corner and its orientation towards the properties in Moorcroft. Are you satisfied that the screening is adequate enough between that building and its neighbours?
For you, Chair, yes, I am, in short. The exact distances for that are set out. I'm sorry, I'm not furnished with a paper version of the report, but the exact distances for that separation to the boundary are set out within the amenity section of the reports before you. I'm comfortable that that separation is adequate to ensure there's no undue privacy loss and overlooking. The property there on Moorcroft is number 7, and it's side on to plot, I think it's plot 17. here. So you've got the side of this property going onto the rear of this property, which tends not to be, and isn't in this instance, sort of primary windows. The windows that are on the first floor of plot 17, those that are bathroom windows, are conditioned to be obscurely glazed and retained as such. And although there is an area on this boundary here at present, which you can see over the bank, there is additional planting proposed, and 2 or 3 quite substantial trees along that section. I think, sorry for the slightly strobe effect here. So it's this section here. So you can see those trees on the boundary are quite substantial. I'm so sorry. It's this section here. This would be the very rear of the garden of number 17. So there is a section of bank here we can see over towards the garaging, and a section of garden and where South West Water own an area with a pumping station. But in my view, the presence of those trees, the separation distance, the rooms you've got facing, and the orientation of those properties is an acceptable relationship.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have Councillor Hipsey, then Councillor Vashon.
Thank you, Chair. My question actually involved the proposal for 10% on-site renewables and the provisions made in Dev 32. And most of those questions have in fact been made by Councillor Mott, for which I thank her. That's all right, don't worry, they've been answered largely. Well, actually, I think that possibly will be the subject of some debate when we get to it. I would ask a question, though, about the same subject. I can't find that as a condition in your report, Ms. Henderson-Smith. I don't know, perhaps I've missed something, but is it there as the on-site renewals? Is it a formal condition? Looking at page 19 of your report and 20, I can't find it there. No, sorry, I beg your pardon. Bottom of page 20, paragraph 6. It is, in fact, there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this shows the importance, actually, of our planning officers actually having a paper copy when IT issues go down. Councillor Vashon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm afraid my questions have also been asked prior to getting to me. But I do have a couple of other things. The vehicle charging points, they're obviously only going to go on the on-plot parking. How many properties will that be exactly? Sorry, I've asked a technical question. I presume that it might be on the ones that actually have garaging.
Through you, Chair. It's certainly the majority. I don't think there are many that don't have on-plot. So it's not just the ones with garaging, even the ones with external parking, which, as you can see from this plan, I'm going to risk zooming in. Brace yourselves. Right, so you can see from this plan that actually the majority of units have on-plot. I think these units at the front don't. They've got a communal parking area here. But all the others, I think with the exception of this, which I think is a flat over garage again, where you've got grouped parking here, all the other units have got on-plot parking. So as I say, it's not just those with garaging. If you own your parking space and it's next to your house, you'll have an electric vehicle charging point.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing was the obviously considering the 2030 zero carbon plans, what sort of energy is going to be used to heat these houses? Do we have that yet, or is that a question I need to ask the developer?
Sorry, Chair, through you. I think it's a question for the developer. There is an energy statement which includes details of the solar panels, but in terms of what the proposal is at the moment to be put forward in terms of mains heating, it's a question best put to the developer, I'm afraid.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Any more questions from members? No. Okay. Then I will move to registered speakers, and first up is Mr. Thomas. If you would like to step up to the podium, as they say, and grab yourself a microphone, which you will then need to put on. Sorry, which one? That is this one here. Okay. Yep, certainly, no problem. If you get yourself ready and get your microphone ready. It's lovely. And then there's a button on the front that says talk that you can press when you're ready, and your 3 minutes will start when you do. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning. I'm a resident in Moorcroft Court, which is just off Moorcroft Close. So I use this road regularly, walking across it. Beautiful pictures, by the way, that you took of that. Lovely view up to Dartmoor, Greenfield site. The residents back in 2018 stipulated overwhelmingly that they didn't want Greenfield sites for any more houses other than the ones down the Crediton Road. And yet here we are again, considering a Greenfield site. And I also believe that that may well be a protected site on the neighbourhood plan or the agreed local plan. And it would have been in the draft as well. We'll come back to that. The reason I'm standing up here now is because the planning officer mentioned that everything's been covered in this process up to now. Well, in actual fact, it hasn't. What's missing is road safety. Nobody has mentioned whatsoever about how are people going to cross that road. That is a main road going in and out of Oakhampton. It services 3 industrial estates, Molehaven. People will go up and down that road all day long, including articulated lorries, HGVs, buses, single, double-decker, domestic traffic, in their thousands, use that on a regular basis. Now, if you look in the top right-hand corner there, you'll see some dotted lines going across. That is the only crossing point for that estate, bar another one left about 100 yards. The nearest assisted crossing point for pedestrians is over a quarter of a mile away outside Costcutters, which some of you will be familiar with. So even now, I can tell you from experience, and I do have that experience, that the majority of traffic using that road exceeds the speed limit. So much so that if you have an articulated lorry go past you at 40 miles an hour or more, it's a frightening experience. So where that little step down there is in the top right-hand corner, if you stood on this side, so the estate side, and looked left, you cannot see, when crossing that road, the traffic coming out of Oakhampton until you're in the middle of the road. Now that's due to hedges, etc., and they can
30
be tended.
seconds.
Sorry? The other thing is the speed limit. What are we going to do about that? It's discussed that he's going to use £5,000 to see whether about moving that. That speed limit is just to the right of the axis of this estate. 40 miles an hour to 30 and 30 to 40. It's dangerous now. People, I'm going to say to you, object this on this ground, and also about the fact of this is a Greenfield site. Thank you.
Time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Thomas? No? Okay. I'd ask you if you'd be kind enough to, that's right, if you place it back. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, and next up is Ms. Somerville, who is from Pasman. Thank you. Same to you if you'd like to step forward, choose another microphone. Lovely. That's it, wonderful. And the same, you have 3 minutes. If you bring the sort of speak a bit down towards your mouth so as it gets picked up. Lovely. When you're ready, you can start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to see you. My name is Eve Somerville. I'm the Regional Planning Officer for Persimmon Homes. The application before you is for 50 homes, and did not reflect the Reform Persimmon Homes focus. However, we have worked with Anna to address these concerns raised by consultation and objectors, and incorporated these into the revised scheme, such as the sensitive layout of the frontage, the housing being simplified to a more rural design. The principle of development has already been established and commits to a higher affordable housing percentage of 40%. The layout has been amended with careful revision to housing design to ensure amenities protected for existing and future residents. The housing materials design reflect the requirement of the Council's design guide using pale render and natural stone. The drainage has been well thought out to ensure the surface water runs into the attenuation and the foul is pumped to the public sewer on Exeter Road. Landscaping has been carefully orchestrated to reflect the character and appearance of the area, using native species and viable planting whilst protecting the boundary. Sufficient parking has been provided and exceeds policy with 18 garages, 81 parking spaces and on-street parking. We have worked closely with Devon County Highways to provide a good street layout with safe access for pedestrians. The speed limit along Exeter Road will be reduced to 30 miles an hour. Significant work has been carried out to ensure no harm to biodiversity, and that continues to be monitored and maintained and will be protected. Some concerns were raised by a neighbour. I met with the neighbour on site and discussed the application and answered all his questions and seemed a positive outcome. Overall, the scheme applies to the Council's policies. The proposal has been supported by the Council specialists, and the Planning Department have recommended approval, subject to conditions, of which we are happy to comply with and are happy with. I've just come from 15 years of local authority planning. In my experience, this is an exciting application and supports local communities and provides local housing for local people. As there is no planning reason to justify a refusal, surely the application should be supported. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Vachon, then Councillor Moyes, I think, and Councillor Mott. No, well, I thought it was your hand. So Councillor Vachon, Councillor Mott, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms Somerville. Just my previous question regarding the energy heating methods. Obviously, and also I'll add a bit to that. Did you actually consider perhaps also a community energy system?
There we go. The site is being fueled with gas energy, but if that is something that we're happy to consider and work with Anna to use.
Sorry, thank you. And did you ever consider sort of a community energy system for the site?
That wasn't something that was required of us, something that we haven't looked into, but again, we're happy to work with Anna to discuss.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mott.
Thank you. So previously I asked about, it's lovely to see some solar panels on site. However, is there a possibility that you might consider the other properties that have a southern aspect being provided with solar panels also? I appreciate that it's 10%, but these days it's moving so fast that...
Yes, absolutely. That's not a problem. We're more than happy to consider those south-facing aspects. It was just a case of obviously addressing policy, but we're more than happy to increase that.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
Thank you. Would you be able to give any indication by what that sort of percentage of increase could potentially be?
I think anything south-facing that actually is functional for those solar panels, we would certainly be able to look at and to put PV panels on. That's fine.
So you'd be happy with the condition
yes.
on that basis?
Yep.
Sanderson Smith, is that a reasonable condition from planning perspective?
It's difficult to achieve that through a condition at this point because this is reserved matters. So external appearance is before you for consideration today. So to require a condition asking for further details of PV panels that alter the external appearance is tricky. You wouldn't normally ask, well, it's not usually acceptable to put a condition on asking for more further details of a reserved matter that you've got before you for consideration. What I would say is I'm fairly confident that PV on south-facing roof slopes, once the units are substantially complete, would be permitted development anyway, going back to the PD point, even where it faces the road, and the permitted development for solar and PV is fairly relaxed. I don't know if legal are having any little synapse firings that might help me secure this.
Mr. Fairbairn, please bear this all out. Thank you.
I don't disagree with what Ms. Henderson-Smith has said. It would be unusual. I suppose one way forward might be to, if you were minded to approve the application, given the assurance that we've been given by the applicant, may well be to approve, is to approve it subject to receiving an amended plan showing the additional units of the PV on the roofs. I mean, it's not as a condition, but it's indicative that you are minded. I think that's probably the only way I can see of doing it, is to approve it subject to receipt of amended plans showing the solar panels. I mean, it's not subjecting to it's not a condition, but it's a condition. It's a condition on your It's a conditional prerequisite to your approval, I think, if I can put it that way. And if the applicant's happy, then we can proceed on that basis. Sorry, that was a bit confused, but apologies. That I think might work.
Okay, would you be acceptable to that one, Ms. Somerville, if it was?
Yes, that'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Vashon, that was your question originally, so I think, yeah. So we will put that in, yeah? Yeah. Councillor Southcote.
With regard to the solar panels, the affordable housing element, do they all have solar panels, or is it just the others?
No, you'll see where the mouse is, where Anna's moving that. They are affordable, social and rented. They have solar panels. We address those southern roof slopes that were best placed to put those PV panels on, to make sure that they were, it doesn't matter the tenure of the house, we just put them where they would function best.
Thank you. Don't think there's any more questions, so thank you very much indeed, Ms. Somerville. If you'd be kind enough just to put your microphone back down as well, please, then that'll clear the decks for the next person. Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure what the position is with it sits within the Oakhampton Hamlets Parish Council, and I think they were going to make a written representation. Has that been received?
It has not, Chair.
Okay, right, thank you. The two ward members are myself and Councillor Vashon, and we are not registered to speak. We will reserve for anything we wish to say in debate. Okay, members, do you have any further questions for the planning officer before we move the recommendation? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Pearce, I have my back to you, and I didn't notice if you had your hand up or not.
If I could, Chairman, there's just something I would like to ask the Highways officer in relation to the grass verges instead of a footway. Would it be the liability of the management company should any damage be caused to the grass verges by people parking on them, which very often happens in when we get wet winters? I know it's said that there's sufficient parking, and the parking is quite generous, what's been put forward, but inevitably on some estates where we've got grass verges, people park on them and they make a dreadful mess. Would it be down to the management company to put that damage right?
Through you, Chair. As yet, we don't know whether the road's going to be offered for adoption as a highway, so I'm afraid I can't answer that one definitively, Councillor Pearce. if it's highway, then it would be the highway authority's responsibility to maintain it. I am confident that unlike some layouts I have seen with grass verges, this is not the type of layout that is going to habitually result in vehicles parking on grass verges. And as I said, from a highway authority's perspective at this moment in time, the preferred option is to have grass verges in the service margins. I can offer no more answer than that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, is there no further questions? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Just been given the actual draft of the revised recommendation. So what I will do, I will actually move the recommendation, which I'll read out, but I will also explain just for the benefit of the members of the public. Moving as laid out is not an indication of how people are going to vote. It's just simply to enable it to go into debate as part of our process. So the revised recommendation is to delegate to head of practice to conditionally approve, subject to the additional condition to secure render additive and subject to receipt of an acceptable roof plan showing additional solar PV panels. Okay, so that is the recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
Chairman, I was doing something similar, so that's fine.
Oh, great. Double whammy. Are you happy to second that, Councillor Pearce?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you. We are now in debate, members. Wish to speak? Councillor Hipsey, then Councillor Moyes, then Councillor Vashon to start with.
Thank you, Chair. A few points here. I'm very gratified to see the inclusion of 40% affordable houses. We know that at the moment these sort of accommodations are very badly needed in our area. So that's one thing very much in favour of this, and as far as I'm concerned. I think we've done the renewables to death. We are all aware that Dev 32, whether it applies here or not, requires the maximum amount of solar paneling and renewable energy. And it looks like we probably have reached some sort of agreement on that. The other thing I would say is my concern about the views from Dartmoor. As a resident of Tavistock, for instance, I think there are some bad practices here where some of the new developments in Tavistock have basically stick out like sore thumbs from Dartmoor. I think this is an exception. I think this is well designed. I don't think it's going to be a maximum. It's going to be a real problem in terms of view. Also, I note that DMPA have approved it in that respect. In terms of the grass verges, if that's what we end up with, there is another aspect to that. It's very minor, but the council does have a biodiversity emergency declared, and basically anything green has got to get our approval, in my opinion. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
Yes, I'm not too happy about pink houses. The railway line, I think I lived adjacent or next door to a railway line in Ivybridge years ago, and you just don't notice it after a few days. It just blends into the other sounds. Where National Park is concerned, there are houses alongside, so I suspect that was their viewpoint. What I can't quite get my head round is that we gave an outline permission and circumstances in Oakhampton have changed since that time. And obviously we can't do anything about that, but it's a bit of a niggle, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vashon.
Thank you, Chairman. I always think it's a little bit sad, actually, because this development's been on the go for a long while, and there's quite a lot of objection to it coming into the town, as we previously heard. But since then, obviously, there's been a lot of toing and froing, and the developers have actually listened to the residents and the objections, and I feel they've done a reasonably good job. We didn't really want to end up with some of the faults that have happened on previous developments, like the little white boxes we had on other developments, and I think the developers have actually listened to this and have actually made it into quite an attractive development. So I'm really happy with that. Things I'm not too enamoured with, the verge areas within the development area, instead of pavements, which is due to a maintenance issue or ease of maintenance. To my mind, I think the safety issue should have overridden that somewhat, and I think people walking in the centre of roads is more dangerous than would be otherwise if there'd been a pavement there. And so I'm a little bit worried about that. I know from other estates where this seems to be a current trend to have grass verges, that you do get people parking on those, particularly delivery lorries and wagons, which there are quite a lot of at the moment, as we noticed. And I feel that is a bit of an issue. So I would have preferred the pavement option within the development. The other things I was talking about, obviously the community energy that could have been considered on that. This development would have been ideal for that, considering all the green space field below it to put in systems, perhaps a heat source pump underneath there to heat all the homes within an area would have been a good thing to consider. Again, I'm a little bit disappointed. It's going to be a gas supply system in there, as I previously said, that we're looking at obviously a zero carbon by 2030 on this, which isn't too far away now. But I think with everything that they've done, all the landscaping, as I say, they've listened to the residents, and they've redesigned accordingly. I'm quite, apart from the pavements, I'm quite happy to approve this development. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other members? As a ward member, I just did want to speak myself, being clear. It says ward member, not as chair. And I am very mindful of the concerns that have been raised. Oh, Councillor Pearce, I'll let you go first. So, because I'll speak as ward member.
Thank you, Chairman. I know there's been a lot of discussion about this application or this site ever since it was approved, the outline was approved. And it was a very difficult decision then. I was actually on that committee. We have a situation where the National Park did not object to the outline application, and they have not objected to what's coming forward now. So one would have thought that they would have strongly objected, seeing that it can be seen from the National Park area. I think there's some really good work being done on this in bringing this scheme forward. And from my own point of view, I think it is one of the better schemes to come forward in Oakhampton in recent years. I mean, some of the applications have left a lot to be desired, and the landscaping on this is I think is really good. I do have concerns about the grass verges, but we have been advised by the highway officer of what's has to be put forward, and we just have to hope that delivery drivers treat the grass verges with some respect if this is approved. The layout is good. I'm pleased to see, really pleased to see that we have not got another block of painted boxes as occurred elsewhere in Oakhampton. And also we've got some good landscaping. It's good to see trees within the site now, which we always used to have many years ago on developments. But unfortunately, a big chunk of development in Crediton Road has not been blessed with that as it should have been. So therefore, given the layout and the scheme in general, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So I'll carry on what I was going to say, that I've been very mindful of the concerns that have been raised, particularly by residents, and I do want to thank those residents for their engagement and reasonableness as well. And I know that the main concerns that have been raised today are regarding the main road, regarding the speeding, the crossing, and the development of a green field. These were all issues that were looked at in some considerable detail at outline stage, which was when that went through, which means it isn't able to come back for consideration today. we can, as a committee, can only look at the application that is before us, which is for reserve matters. I know the neighbourhood plan is nowhere near any stage to be taken into account. And looking at this application, I can see that there's been a lot of work has gone into it, into creating what looks like a good design, you know, with play area and with plenty of open space. And in the absence of any sort of statutory or any key consultees, Dartmoor National Park, Southwest Water, other organisations actually putting any objection that hasn't been overcome, I will be supporting this application today. Okay? So, any other members wish to speak in debate who haven't done already? Okay, so we will take this to the vote. So, all in favour, please show. Any against? Okay, lovely, thank you. Oh, sorry, any abstentions? I couldn't see. Yes, thank you. Okay. So, thank you very much. Thank you to those who have attended this one this morning. Normally, we would say to anybody who's registered that you're welcome to stay, but I would suggest today, with the COVID things as they are, that perhaps those who are registered to speak for this application, I think it might be wiser if you were to make your way home. And obviously, you can catch up and look at any of this on YouTube, which has been streamed live, and you'll be able to see the recording. Councillor Ratcliffe, I wonder if you'd be kind enough to fetch Councillor Leach back in again, and then we will recommence with the next application. Thank you. If any members do require a quick comfort break, then we will, and I think what we will do, we will say we will reconvene, well, in 5 minutes. It's 20 past by that clock. Okay, thank you. Right, so we will continue. Thank you very much for your patience. When you've got to go, you've got to go. Right, so we will now move on to application 1355/19 full, which is at 10 Ford Street, Tavistock, and again over to Ms Henderson-Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for a full application for 6 flats and 1 cottage sited on a fairly prominent corner plot in Tavistock Centre. It's where you can see this little house image on the corner of the roundabout. It's currently the site of a car sales site and was formerly a garage and petrol filling station. Some of you may well be familiar with it. See if I can do all this without crashing all the IT this time. It is this site here, on the corner of this roundabout that's got the spire opposite it, and this is the Drake statue, so people can get their bearings, and then you've got the Roman Catholic Church up here. It's before members at the request of Councillor Coulson, as set out in your reports, on the basis of concerns regarding parking and access. As you're aware, we've got Phil Townsend from County Highways present, members, if you've got any queries later, and similarly, given the site's prominent position within Tavistock, within the conservation area and the World Heritage Site, Graham Lawrence, our heritage specialist, is here if there are any detailed questions. As with the previous scheme that you saw in Oakhampton, this scheme before you and proposal is before you today for consideration is also a revised scheme from that which was initially proposed, and has again sought to address the various former specialist and officer concerns and objections in order to arrive at the proposal that's before you today. For those less familiar with the site, I'll take you through a few site photographs to give you some context for the development. So as I say, there's the application site. You can see the Drake Memorial. So this is the view across from the site towards the rear of what's now called Fitzford Lodge. So that's the fairly new Churchill development that's on the corner of Plymouth Road now. It turns that corner on Plymouth Road. So this is the site. This is Ford Street. No, didn't think I'd manage it. This is Ford Street, and this is the site, again, slightly close up, so you can see the Fitzford Lodge residential development along here. This is the view looking west along Ford Street, so looking back almost to the point at which I would have taken the previous photograph, was taken from this sort of hedge corner here. This is looking back towards it. You can see the Roman Catholic Church and the cottages along Ford Street itself. Similarly, if you were to carry on walking along the pavement in the image I just showed you and around the corner to round towards Plymouth Road and the Drake statue, this is the corner as you would come round. You can see Drake Villas opposite. This help. I am so sorry, I do not know what is wrong with me today. This image helps to give an idea of the kind of scale of development. You can see that the properties along here on Ford Street are of a cottage design, quite a domestic, low domestic scale. But as you round that corner onto the end of Ford Street and into Plymouth Road, obviously the scale of the buildings gets larger, the land also rises, so Drake Villas on the opposite side of the road are that much higher, and similarly the 3 stories on the Churchill development at Fitzford Lodge there on the left-hand side of your screen shows that you've got this sort of, I tend to use this phrase bookends, but you've got these 2 quite high developments either side of that section as you look down towards the Drake statue and Plymouth Road. Just looking back north towards the spar, for those of you who are familiar with that, you can just about see the red lettering in here. So you've got Drake Villas on the left-hand side, this is Fitzford Lodge, and then the boundary to the site itself with the Ford Street cottage beyond, and just that lower scale and height of the units along there compared to this development here. Again, looking from the other side of the road, along the side of the road that the development would be on. Again, you can see the Churchill flags there. As I say, it's a relatively new development looking up towards that roundabout. And closer still, but this was to give an idea of the exact, given the concerns about highways and the access in and out of the site. This is the exact site frontage onto the footway and the highway that would be as it is following the proposal. So it's to give members an exact idea of really the width there and the highway and arrangement on that frontage as it is now and as it's proposed. So just going through some of the plans. This, as you will see from the report, the ridge height of this scheme is fairly crucial, not just for the normal urban design type reasons and amenity with regards to, as I've pointed out, the much lower ridge heights of Ford Street as you round the bend onto the sort of higher ridges of Fitsford Lodge and Drake Villas, but also because there are long views of the Roman Catholic Church across town, and there is intervisibility between St Eustatius Church in the very centre of town and the Roman Catholic Church. And with the previous schemes and the initially submitted scheme here, it was raised by both our conservation specialists, but in particular by Historic England, that should be maintained and that had to be well explored and, you know, ensure that those views and that relationship could be retained across this site once a heightened development was potentially in place there. So your ridge levels are quite crucial, particularly as I'll talk later on, when you then combine with the fact that there's a floor level issue on this site as well, with regards to the fact that the site's within flood zone 3. So you've essentially got a constraint that's pushing everything upwards from underneath, and then you've got a constraint that's pushing everything downwards from the other side. Going on to the elevations, I'm happy at a later stage, if you wish to zoom in on some of these. I'll have a go now, she says. So the southwest elevation you can see at the top would be the one that would be visible from the mini roundabout. So if you're looking back towards town, and the building you can see on the right-hand side there is the Churchill development, Fitsford Lodge. So that would be the main view from the other side of the road in the roundabout. And the northwest elevation at the bottom there is the view if you were standing on the other side of the road on Ford Street. So you can see the existing Ford Street property, sorry, just waiting for the cursor to turn up, is here. The proposal is to put the additional cottage onto the end there, pretty much exact same scale, a replication, if you will, of that unit, and then allowing the main bulk of the new build element to start at a similar height and then rise as it rounds this corner to the main elevation here, which would face onto the highway. And when I say rounds, I don't use that lightly. This corner here, it's quite difficult to draw in elevation, but this corner here is in fact rounded. You'll see when I zoom back out onto the floor plans, that is if you can have a rounded corner, that is a rounded elevation as you turn that corner from one road to the other. But you can see that, contrary really to one of the earlier sort of iterations of this, both of those frontages are quite active frontages. There's a clear facing facade to both of those, with doorways and entrances and windows onto both of those, rather than either being a slightly secondary, less active frontage. It's also important to note with regards to the later sort of amenity sections within the report. I don't have the earlier iteration of the plans on here. Sometimes I include those, but I find it can be a bit confusing. But that you've got now, there are very few windows facing the rear and side elevations. So these two are, I think, bathroom or ensuite windows. It's detailed in the report. And they face the end, again, the side elevation of Fitsford Lodge. And similarly, if you were to walk around here and look at this back elevation, you'd be looking at this, which is the one that would face over, for want of a better way of putting it, the garden areas to the proposed and existing Ford Street properties. Again, you can see there's only these 4 windows and these, and they are obscurely glazed bathroom windows as well, and that's secured within the conditions. So the internal layout has been quite massively reorientated. Along with the external design, it's been a complete rearrangement of those units to ensure that the outward-facing windows that go towards any other residential unit are very much secondary and can be secured as such. Similarly, the rear of this elevation has got, it's just evident here, it's got sort of projecting bays, if you like, with a blank facade and side-facing windows. They've got some in Princess Hay, you may have seen the way, as I say, the main facade you'd normally expect the bay window or the projecting window to be in is blank, and then the windows are in the side so that you haven't got the overlooking, and then every other side-facing window is conditioned to be obscurely glazed. So you have a window with a view looking at an obscurely glazed, and then the next unit has a window with a view looking at an obscurely glazed. So it allows for a level of amenity. If you're using that unit, you've got an outlook, you've got light coming in, but you haven't created an overlooking issue for those existing units that are not that far from the rear. That would be a better way of me having tried to demonstrate that rather than just waving my hands around. The windows are in here, not in here, in these projections. This is a blank gate, blank facade, and the windows face here, one being with a view out, the one on the next unit obscurely glazed, one with a view out, and so on. So as I say, it's quite a clever design solution to one of those issues. This is the ground floor layout, which is of interest when you look at parking numbers. And the layout, this is the cottage. So you've got Ford Street here. So this is the single cottage. And then this is the main building, which hosts the 6 flats and the parking, and then this ground floor access in and out. So I'll leave that on screen while I just talk through some of these points. So the proposal's response to the varying scales of the surrounding buildings I've talked about with regards to the active frontage, but the fact that it's still of a height that it retains a certain element of gravitas. That is a prominent point as you come into Tavistock, and a row of small units perhaps wouldn't have the bite you might want on that corner. So whilst it has these quite deep furrows within the ridges in the roof to allow that intervisibility still that I talked about with historic England, it's still of a height that it adds a punctuation to that corner as you enter the town. The materials that are proposed are predominantly, it's a natural slate roof, it's natural local stone randomly laid, which is what we would always secure with natural stone in a location like this. Again, I've talked about the roofs and the views through and the intervisibility with the 2 churches. So, as detailed in the report, the height has been much debated. It is flood zone 3. I've put all the actual individual figures within the report, but the Environment Agency have required a certain internal floor level. Going a step back, I think most members will be aware, but I will just glim over it for those members who perhaps aren't, or the members of the public for their benefit. Normally, a site within flood zone 3, we have to apply the sequential test. And in general, in 99.9% of cases, now that we have a 5-year housing land supply, we have an up-to-date joint local plan. Most housing proposals within a flood zone 3 wouldn't even get over that first hurdle. Town centres are a difficult one because most of our town centres are, as you would expect, in flood zones. Historically, you're built near the river. So town centre locations can be slightly more difficult to apply that rule to so steadfastly. So in this particular instance, the site is within flood zone 3. However, there are a number of reasons why we would wish to see it redeveloped. It's not a particularly attractive site at the moment. As I said, it's within the World Heritage Site. It's within the conservation area. It's a very prominent site as you enter Tavistock and circulate Tavistock, to be honest. It's earmarked, if you like, within the conservation area management plan that our preference would be that it would be desirable to see it redeveloped and regenerated in that corner. So there are a number of sort of sustainability issues and other overriding issues that, as material considerations, that are in its favour. And similarly, just in terms of its location, it is a very sustainable location. It's a level walk to the town centre, meadowlands, recreational areas, the industrial estate, jobs, schools, all those kinds of things. So, as I sort of pointed out, if you were to try and achieve the internal floor level, so having decided as officers that we felt the material considerations in favour of its development overruled the flood issue, the next step is to go, right, so what can we do to alleviate the chance of any risk during flood? And the Environment Agency asked for this certain level of internal ground floor level. Now, as I say, the figures exactly are within the report, but to achieve that, you would have to take the ridge up. The architect has tried very hard and succeeded, I think, in managing to make up about 50 centimetres, I think it was, internally without taking the ridge up. There's some sort of jiggery-pokery internally happening there to raise it up a bit further. But to meet the EA's requirement, it would have to take the ridge up. The whole unit would have to go up. And we had only just really arrived at a point where Historic England were finally happy with the ridge really being at its uppermost limits in terms of the historic side of things. So there is only one unit which has ground floor sleeping, and that is this unit on the end. None of the others do. The others are first floor and above, including the cottage. So unusually, as I say, although there is an outstanding objection from the Environment Agency, officers consider that the overriding sustainability, heritage and other benefits, particularly the fact that a redevelopment here is in line with the Conservation Area Management Plan and the provision of some town centre units outweigh that objection. As I say, especially given there's only one unit that has that ground floor sleeping and that the depth of potential floodwater now has been minimised by that lifting of that internal floor level as high as it can be. Again, as detailed in the report, it is now considered that the arrangement of the windows, the distances and the orientation is a more neighbourly arrangement, particularly for a town centre. You have to look at these things in context. But it is a more neighbourly arrangement with no undue losses of privacy or light, providing that the recommended conditions are applied. It's noted that the objections and reason for the call-in highlight the access and parking. However, it does need to be remembered that there is a current fallback position on this site, and it's a car sales yard. The number of existing and potential vehicular movements on that site are quite great. I think there's at least 2 drop curb accesses in and out of that site. So the number of vehicular movements at the moment are quite high, and the potential, that could increase without any control from us whatsoever. So we need to be mindful of that there's a fallback position at the moment with regards to that highways issue, and that the visibility actually from the proposed access is very good in both directions. It's acknowledged that the number of spaces for parking provided is 6, and that it's 6 flats and a cottage proposed. It isn't as high as the SPD guidance, but as I said earlier, that is only guidance, and context has to be taken into account. The same guidance would stand if this were a site on the edge of a very small village with no bus service and everything else. This, on the other hand, is a site with in a very sustainable town centre location, and as I said, only a short level walk from jobs, services, retail, the pretty frequent bus service from the bus station down to Plymouth. So on balance, again, it's considered that the quantity of parking provided is adequate in this instance. So as always, members, the history, the comments, the detailed analysis are within my report before you. However, in summary, officers consider that the proposal before you has responded well to the quite high number of constraints, as you'll have seen from the report, that this site has, and that the resultant scheme accords with policy and will result in a redevelopment of the site as desired by the Conservation Area Management Plan, and result in a building sort of worthy of this fairly prominent gateway site into the town. As such, the recommendation is to delegate to the head of practice for conditional approval, subject to the securing of an acceptable Section 106 that you'll have seen is to secure the standard Tamar Valley environmental management scheme monies and the open space sport and recreational monies that are policy compliant, which will go predominantly towards meadowlands and its maintenance and upkeep. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend, did you wish to add anything with your highways hat on? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Ms Henderson-Smith has done such a complete job this time. There's not really an awful lot that I can actually add, but I would say that the existing access, the important thing is, what, as you mentioned, is that the existing site is a car sales establishment, and the vehicle movement potential on and off that site is considerably in excess of what would be expected to be derived from the proposed development. That's a helpful shot, actually, because I don't know if you can appreciate the actual access is the full width of the plot. It goes all the way from the black Volkswagen pickup on the right round past the white Porsche, past the red, whatever it is there. It goes right round the corner. The only thing that I can establish that has stopped it being an access is this small post and rail fence that the applicant has probably erected for security purposes as much as anything, rather than convenience reasons. I suspect the planning authority would have difficulty in enforcing against the removal of that fence if they chose to remove it. In any event, the applicant is proposing to focus the access to the safest possible location, which is round about where that black pickup is parked now, parked straddling the footway, I would mention as well. So yet another issue that wouldn't occur possibly with the potential new development. So for those reasons, one more thing. The internal layout was slightly substandard originally, but the applicant has now amended it for full internal dimensions in accordance with the design guide's requirements, 6.8 metres behind each space to provide for adequate manoeuvring space in and out of the car parking spaces. There's also cycle parking provided on site. For that reason, the Highway Authority has raised no objection and recommended conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions myself, actually, so I will launch in. One is, I think, relevant for highways, and you've answered the question about turning. And with the site as it stands, as you say, there can be access on and off on any place. It's just simply the post and rail fencing. But with this new development, obviously, that access will just be in one space. And are you satisfied that the visibility display will be sufficiently robust, shall we say?
There are no issues with respect to visibility from that access point. It is as good as you can get in all directions because of its location relative to the roundabout. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question, actually, Ms. Anderson-Smith. Actually, that layout is the ideal one. I'm just thinking of the existing remaining, what was an original pair of semi-detached cottages. There is a remaining one, because one was obviously, and is looking to be replaced to create, yes, number 9. Yes, do you know what I mean? Where the new cottage is expected to, yes, that will be adjoining number 9, presumably, and there was originally a cottage there years ago. Is that correct? That's from the report.
I think historically.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, historically. There are some windows of number 9 which look out this way. They will obviously be lost if this building goes up against them. Has the number 9 got alternative windows, lights? Natural light, that was the word I was looking for that particular property?
It has got alternative natural light windows. I'm afraid I haven't got an image. Oh, I don't think I've got an image. Let me just check the photographs. You've got, I think there's just the two ground floor units. I mean, that would be part of the party wall. There are other windows serving those rooms, and that would be part of the party wall discussion, which obviously falls under different legislation.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you. Members, any questions? Right, I have got, well, hang on a minute. Can you just keep your hands up for a minute? So I've got Councillor Hipsey, Moyes and Ratcliffe. Thank you.
Two questions, if I may, Chair. The first one is if we can go to the floor plan, please. The one, that one, yes. The garages, from what I can work out, there are 3 garages. Are they shared? So the residents here would be expected to, I don't know, negotiate which garages they're going to use, or how do you think that might work?
So through you, Chair, no, there's no garaging. There are 6 parking spaces.
Oh, so that's not covered. Sorry.
No, that section's not covered.
Okay, that answers
this
my question.
circulation area is, and then you've got storage for bins and their bicycles, bike storage underneath on the ground floor. But there isn't a condition requiring it's 1 for 1, but that would be usual. There is a line at which you kind of have to leave it to the commercial market, but I would expect that each one of those would be allocated, as you usually see with a painted number, to each one of the flats.
Yeah, if it's not covered, that answers my question, really. So the second question relates to page 27 of your report. The penultimate paragraph talks about concerns by the county archaeologist. And I'll quote the last sentence there. I would therefore suggest that the applicant be asked to address mitigation of impacts on industrial archaeology by submitting a written scheme of investigation with the application. This may be a question for the applicant, but my question is, has that written scheme been submitted, please?
It hasn't. That's a standard comment from Devon County Archaeology, and what it normally says, and I think it goes on to say, is ideally we'd like a written scheme of investigation, WSI, up front. If not, please can you secure it by condition? And generally speaking, we secure via condition, and it's down as condition number 6 in your reports.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes and Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yeah, this site is at the bottom of a long, fairly steep hill. Do we know if there have been any flooding issues with water coming down the hill on this particular site?
I don't know of any specific local scenarios where that's happened. It is, I think, within the critical drainage area. So surface water flooding has been picked up. The Environment Agency have also obviously dealt with the kind of fluvial flood zone. Our internal drainage engineers have dealt with the surface water flooding issues. Previously, they weren't happy with the details that have been provided, and now with conditions they are. So I haven't been made aware, as we have on some sites where we get photographs sent of particular issues. I'm not aware of any of that. And so any issues that are known within that area will have been looked at by our drainage engineers, combined with the fact that at the moment the entire site is impermeable anyway. There's obviously no drainage down into the ground on the site because the whole site's hard surfaced. So really any additional roof space or hard surfacing on here won't make any difference per se in terms of that issue.
And secondly, there's quite a lot of building going on in Tavistock at the moment, but I don't know how many sites have flats in them.
I'd love to be able to sit here and tell you exactly how many. That would really make my day. I can't. What I can tell you of the sites I've dealt with, which of late has been quite a few of them, is that not many is the answer. I think you're quite right to raise the point. The majority on the Cowlington Road Bovis development are houses. I think there are some bogs, some flats over garages, and I think a couple are market, but I think they're predominantly affordable housing. Of late, I'm just not sure there have been many open market sites within the centre of Tavistock. None spring to mind. I mean, the Tavistock members would know it much better, but I think the most recent development obviously is Fitsford Lodge, and that's a certain type of accommodation. And other than that, sites of this size within town have predominantly been, those kind of windfall sites have predominantly been built out. And the larger allocations are obviously more around the edge of the town, and you're quite right, they are predominantly non-flatted.
Thank you.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, if I may, for the planning officer. The first one is, the drawing is up. Good, that's revision F. On the planning portal, similar drawing is revision G, and the question is, on G, the roof is fairly plain, whereas on the one which is being projected, revision F, it looks like modelling of some sort within the slate tiles. Can you explain what the situation is with regard to the roof construction, please?
I can, but I'm afraid you're just going to have to give me a second. Just having a quick look at which set of floor plans and which revision is listed within the accordance with plans condition, which is right at the end of the report.
Would this be something we can perhaps return to when the we get later on when the agent speaks, and that will give you a chance to perhaps look it up?
Yeah, the one referred to in the report is G, so I think there's a lack of update here. I can open.
I think if I may butt in, I think the one projected is fine. The only thing I don't understand is when you look at the roof plan and